Hello and welcome back to Parc Fermé Parlay with Kieran Downey. It has been a minute. It has been a minute, but we're back. We missed the entire Japanese Grand Prix weekend because we were in Barcelona for the 4 hours of Barcelona European Le Mans Series race, which was incredible. We've got a whole vlog coming on that soon within the next week and a half. We're just absolutely up the wall with it this week. I'm not gonna lie, guys. It's been a struggle, and I just didn't have it in me to record. I just couldn't find the time, the energy. Everything has just been an absolute struggle. So we are back today with a bumper episode of the Parc Fermé Parlay race review. We've just finished Bahrain, and thank God the Elms race didn't fall on this weekend, because I didn't feel so bad missing Japan after what seems to have been an incredibly dull race in Suzuka. This race paid off. So I don't feel so bad having missed Japan, and I would have been devastated to have missed this. It has been a fairly eventful weekend. We're not going to talk really about practice. We're going to touch on a few points about the qualifying session, because there is so much to get through about this race. So as always, we're going to kick off with the team that finished last in the championship last year, and that is Sauber. And we're starting off with Gabriel Bortoleto, who qualified 18th, finished 19th, and Nico Hülkenberg, who qualified 16th and finished 13th. I was hoping for a pretty decent weekend, a decent race actually for Sauber, because they looked fairly promising during the practice sessions. Quali wasn't great for either of the drivers. We'll come into Nico's issue in a minute. But yeah, Bortoleto just was nowhere to be found at all. And I don't know whether he was struggling with grip on the tyres. I don't know what his exact problems were, but there was quite a few drivers that just languished about at the back of the pack that never made an impression whatsoever. There's about 3 of them that just stayed where they were pretty much the entire race, Bortoleto being one of them. So not a great race for Bortoleto. Hülkenberg looked to have a decent qualifying. He got through to Q2 and managed to sort of pip Alex Albon just at that final minute of Q1. And then when Q3 started, he got his lap time deleted for Q1 because of a track limit about 45 minutes after it happened, which meant he actually was starting the race 16th, not where he qualified in 15th. And it also meant that Alex Albon, who should have gotten into Q2, didn't actually have a chance to potentially get himself further up the field than 15th, having originally what we thought qualified 16th, but actually got through to Q2. A complete mess from the FIA, and I actually can't believe that in modern day Formula One, it's taken 45 minutes to an hour for a track limits violation. And I've seen that the FIA came out with a statement and had said that there are hot spots around each of the tracks that are known for track limits violations, and those are the ones that are monitored consistently throughout a session. The other areas that you can pick up track limits, such as where Nico Hülkenberg did, are not as closely monitored, and it actually took some time before it was picked up on, I believe, by the sort of FIA central office, which is, I believe, in Geneva. It's wild to me that that took so long, because it is a slam dunk. You're either on the track or you're off the track. There's no two ways about it. You're either within the white lines or without the white lines. And Nico Hülkenberg was out with the white lines, and it took 45 minutes for us to figure out that that was the case, and he got his lap time deleted. It's absolutely baffling to me, and just another lesson. I understand that there's areas that you watch, there's areas that you don't, but I have to say I think it is just complete incompetence on the FIA's part. And these sort of issues that the FIA are having just seem to be happening more and more often. It's baffling to me that this is what is happening, and the FIA really need to get their issues sorted, because it's embarrassing, quite honestly. Hülkenberg, I thought, might have a bit of a better race. He obviously finished 13th. He did pick up some. He had a little bit of a collision with Liam Lawson, which I think maybe put him on the back foot. But yeah, just not a great weekend for the Sauber team all in all. Moving on to the Williams team, and Alex Albon, who qualified 15th, finished 12th, and Carlos Sainz, who qualified 8th, did not finish. And once again, very unfortunate for Alex Albon that he couldn't get a shot at Q2 because of this bizarre Nico Hülkenberg situation, and I actually feel a bit sorry for the guy because he could have gotten a bit further up the field potentially if he'd actually gotten a chance at Q2. So again, just the FIA being incompetent. Alex was, do you know something? Alex had some pretty decent battles throughout the race. It was quite enjoyable to watch him battling with Hadjar and Antonelli and Behrman. There was some really good on-track battles happening there, but just unfortunate for Alex Albon. It just really wasn't his weekend. Carlos Sainz, very unfortunate weekend. I was really hoping for another driver I was really hoping was going to have a decent performance, especially with a decent qualifying, and unfortunately, what I originally thought was just a really close call, it actually was contact between Yuki Tsunoda and Carlos Sainz, which caused a red flag because there was debris all over the track, and I thought it was a bit of the wings, but actually it wasn't. He had a huge hole in his side pod. Like, part of the carbon fibre on, I think it was the right-hand side pod, there was just a massive gash out of it, and you could see the internal workings of the car. And he did quite a few laps. Like, he got through the safety car and was back running. And I found it a bit wild that actually when I seen just how big the damage to the car was, why Williams just continued to run him, because he was hemorrhaging time. He wasn't going to get any further up. He wasn't going to be quick with that damage to his side pod. So why are we still running him? I found that really confusing from Williams, because they did end up having to retire the car. Very unfortunate for Carlos Sainz. But after that contact with Tsunoda, how, when there's that big of a break, that much damage to the side pod, did Williams think that they could continue running Carlos? I find it a bit weird from Williams, because I think if they had just let him run further, he would have just finished further and further down the grid. So I understand why they retired him, but I just don't understand why, when they seen the damage, continued to let Carlos run. I also find it mental that Yuki Tsunoda didn't pick up a penalty for causing that collision, but we'll come on to Yuki ever so shortly. He got a 10-second time penalty, which he did serve. I wonder if that is actually why they kept him out all that time. There was a document issued that he didn't actually serve his penalty and that he was going to get a grid drop in Saudi, but they've recalled that document and reissued that it is just a 10-second time penalty for Carlos Sainz, which he's already served, so that won't carry forward. And he's also gotten 2 penalty points on his licence. Moving on to the Red Bull sister team, Visa Cash App RB, and Isaac Hadjar, who qualified 12th, finished 14th, and Liam Lawson, who qualified 17th, finished 17th. I've not got much for Hadjar, to be honest with you. It wasn't the best race for him. He was involved in some battles, and it was nice to see these rookies really sort of getting their elbows out, and there was some great battling between, as I said, him, Alex Albon, Kimi Antonelli and Oliver Behrman. He obviously just couldn't hook it up to really challenge for points. It was a bit of a tricky one. The only tyre that really seemed to work was the medium, that you could get obviously longevity out the tyre because the soft just degraded too much, but also the hard just provided zero grip whatsoever, and every driver that went onto the hard really struggled on it. So not a great race for Isaac Hadjar, and I really just want the best. He has actually, I think, along with Oliver Behrman and Kimi Antonelli, been one of the rookies that is just impressing me so much, because he has had some great performances out there, and I actually, like, sometimes you're seeing him and he's quicker than the Red Bulls. He's quicker than Max, and that's just wild to me that second team is that, and that a rookie is pulling these amazing performances better than his seasoned counterparts in what's supposed to be the faster car. I know that Bahrain is probably, what we're seeing is probably a lot of true performance from these teams, because you can overtake and you can really get up close behind the car and get the job done. That being said, the conditions are, obviously, it's quite hot, it's a night race, it's all of these different things. So I'll be intrigued to see when we get to a day race where you can overtake. Silverstone is probably going to be the next one, I think. We'll come on and talk about this whole issue that we're having towards the end of the episode. But I'm interested to see how he fares at other tracks where you can overtake. Not that there's much of them, but I think Hajar, is definitely a talent that we should all be keeping an eye on, because he's seriously impressing me, and I think this weekend he just got a bit unlucky. Moving on to his teammate Liam Lawson, who had a shocker of a weekend. An absolute shocking weekend. He was out in Q1 P17. He had an issue with the DRS. When he was qualifying, he was on his fast lap. He opened up the DRS and it shut almost immediately. I don't know whether he sort of went over a bit of a lip on the track and the car read that as sort of hitting the brakes and it closed the DRS, but it hemorrhaged him lap time and he obviously didn't have enough time to go any further. So that's a shame for him. I have to say though, he was incredibly scrappy throughout that entire Grand Prix. It wasn't a clean race for Lawson, and he picked up quite a few penalties. He got a 5-second time penalty for causing a collision with Lance Stroll. He was noted for a safety car infringement. I believe that was no further action. He got another 10-second time penalty for causing a collision with Hulkenberg, and I believe it was one of the drivers, like many, that picked up quite a few track limits violations. So, but a pretty messy weekend all around. He started on the hard tyres and really struggled on them, to be honest with you. But again, that was just the hard tyre. Max Verstappen struggled on it. Bortoleto struggled on it. Hamilton struggled on it. Like, everyone that ran that hard tyre really struggled. I think the only team that thought about it wisely and had the sort of tyres, the correct tyres, was McLaren, who went into that race with 2 sets of the medium tyres per driver. So it just wasn't a great race for Liam Lawson, to be quite honest with you. And I just find him to be, this season, I find him to be incredibly messy when I didn't find that previously with him. I mean, last year I found him to be a bit annoying and a bit scrappy out on track when it came to the likes of Alonso and Perez. And it's not even that he's got these like little issues with other drivers now where he's like sort of getting himself worked up by that. He is just being a bit messy. And I actually thought that at first it was all to do with just not being suitable for the Red Bull car and it being that car that was just really difficult. But time and time again, I'm just not seeing... His racecraft, I think, is just incredibly poor so far from what I'm seeing from Liam Lawson. So yeah, not a great weekend. However, unlike his teammate, he didn't get shown a black and white flag. So there was black and white flags being waving all over the gaff. Hajar was one. So yeah, quite a poor performance this weekend from VCarb, to be quite frank. All right, moving on to a team that had a bloody brilliant weekend, and that is Haas, with Oliver Bearman, who qualified 20th, finished 10th, and Esteban Ocon, who qualified 14th, finished 8th. Now I'm going to talk about Esteban Ocon first, because well done to the team for turning the car around in time for the race. He had a pretty high profile crash in qualifying, which obviously put him out in Q2. It was in the first few runs of the first runs of Q2. He had just done his outlap, was going into the fast lap. He, I think, was just on the wrong line, was coming through turn 2, a bit of a strange angle on a bit of a strange line. Tried to accelerate, tried to upshift, lost the rear of the car, steered into it and spun off the track and hit the barrier. So well done to the mechanics for getting that sorted. The strategy for Haas, I think, was pretty decent this weekend because they pitted Ocon very, very early. And a lot of us thought it was maybe too early. But the undercut at Bahrain is incredibly powerful. And we all thought it was incredibly strange when he pitted so early. But after the next sort of after the first round of pit stops came in for the rest of the drivers, he got track position and managed to retain that pretty decent track position. The safety car helped him massively. He got the benefit there. So it was all around, I think, a pretty decent strategy weekend for Haas and for Esteban Ocon. Ocon kept himself pretty clean. It was nice to see a decent race from Esteban Ocon. His teammate, Ollie Bearman, how Oliver Bearman didn't get driver of the day, I have no idea. To qualify last and then finish the race in the points is a phenomenal job. So well done to Ollie Bearman for that, because that was incredible. Bearman had a great weekend. I wouldn't say it was stellar. He did gain 5 positions in the opening lap. He was very lucky with the safety car and managing to get a free pit stop there, gained a heap of positions. And I mean, he did have some track limits violations, so did everyone, to be quite honest with you. It was a decent weekend for Behrman, and it's these kind of performances that I'm like, that's why you're in F1. That's why you got, because yes, the performance in F2 last year wasn't great, but Prema was struggling last year. Their car was a bit of a, they were struggling with their car. His F1 performances were superb last year, and I was a bit worried when we came into this year, especially in the opening few races, that, this is not going to be a good year. I thought the car was going to be a struggle, but they really just sort of found a groove, I think, and it's really exciting to watch Oliver Behrman race. He was doing some pretty decent moves out there. He was involved in some good battles, and it was nice to see him really getting his elbows out, similar to Isaac Hadjar, Kimi Antonelli, who we'll come on and speak about. He did get noted for an unsafe release, but I seems to be no further investigation on that one, because usually they're like slam dunk penalties, but nothing seems to have come up, I don't think. So I'm happy for that. I don't want him to lose any points, to be quite honest with you, because with Ocon getting P8 and Behrman getting P10, that actually puts Haas 5th in the championship. 5th. Isn't that wild? So Haas have had a pretty decent weekend. Long may it continue. And they're doing well, which is very nice to see. I'm glad that they've continued the decent performances into this year, because I was actually worried that they were the slowest car at one point, so I'm glad to see they're not. Moving on to a team that had a pretty mixed bag of a weekend, we have Jack Doohan, who qualified 11th, finished 15th, and Pierre Gasly, who qualified 5th, started 4th and finished 7th. Who the fuck's car 20? Who's car 27? Hulkenberg, he has been referred to the stewards, or his car has been referred to the stewards. Now, in the post-race checks, they checked his skid wear and it was below the regulated 9mm. Now, this is a slam dunk disqualification and is usually pretty quick to clear up, so we will keep an eye on that one, but expect a disqualification for Hulkenberg coming pretty shortly. Right, where were we? Who were we talking about? I've lost it. Jack Doohan. To be honest with you, I'm not really impressed by Jack Doohan this weekend. I haven't really been impressed by him at all, to be honest with you, so far this season. I actually thought I was hoping for a decent result for him during qualifying. Qualifying 11th, I thought, this is good. Okay, I can work with this. But he's just a bit messy and a bit scrappy. His racecraft's a bit poor. He racked up enough track limits violations. He got a 5-second time penalty, I think it was. Yeah, he got a 5-second time penalty for track limits. And listen, I understand that Japan was the issue in Japan was an outlier. It was something that was a learning curve for him, obviously having the DRS open going into that corner, not realising that, he brakes so late into the corner that you have to sort of turn it off yourself. But apart from that, I'm actually just a little bit unimpressed by Doohan on the whole. And I understand that with this, the team have thrown their support behind Jack Doohan and said, Oliver Oakes came forward and was like, he's got our support 100%. And maybe that is correct. Maybe Alpine are better at lying than Red Bull are. But with all the talk happening about Franco Colapinto, and I understand that some of it might be unsubstantiated, and it's a tricky one, but all of these things adding up. Yes, the crash in Japan was a big learning curve, but all these track limits violations, not scoring any points. I don't think he's got any points, really. Let's quickly look. Yeah, he's got no points. He's had a couple of crashes now. He's racking up track limits in this race, got penalties. I'd say it's touch and go, I have to say. I actually think he's maybe got until the summer. But I'm wary. I want him to do well, and I'm just not seeing it. But then, I'd say that maybe Alpine are not as cutthroat as Red Bull, but Flavio Briatore is cutthroat, and he will not want Doohan in the car, not scoring points and racking up penalties and crashing and stuff. So it's a tricky one, to be honest with you, but I'm not massively impressed by Jack Doohan. I was impressed by his qualifying. I thought, this is going to be good. We're going to get some points on the board. And then we're getting 5-second penalties for track limits. And I know track limits was catching out so many of the drivers, but I just don't think it's good enough, to be honest with you. His teammate, however, had a bloody brilliant weekend. Pierre Gasly qualified 4th, and that is his highest qualifying in Bahrain, so that's amazing. He did obviously gain a position because of the grid drop from Antonelli. And I have to say that it was nice to see Gasly. I was kind of confused. Not confused, but I was watching it and I thought, right, I've got it. He's managing his tyres. He's letting the race come to him, and you know, maybe through pit stops he'll get some track position and everything like that. But he didn't really put up much of a fight whenever there was, you know, someone from behind trying to overtake. He kept himself really out of trouble. I think that scoring any points was more important than battling to score huge points from keeping faster cars behind, if that makes any sense. He didn't really try and fight Leclerc to get ahead of him. When there was other cars coming up behind him, he almost sort of let them pass. He did, however, manage to keep Max Verstappen behind him for quite a bit, and I imagine that really infuriated Max. And, you know, just staring at the back end of that Alpine, I imagine, probably pissed him off quite a bit. So I do think there was some case of points are better than no points. Keep yourself out of bother and just sort of bring it home. And do you know what? I think Gasly did just that. It was a pretty decent weekend for him. Just kept his nose out of trouble, which is better than a lot of the grid. As I said, track limits and penalties getting thrown out left, right and centre. We've got potential disqualifications on the way. So I don't think it's a bad result for Gasly. His first points this season, the team's first points this season, all in all, a fairly decent weekend for Pierre Gasly. All right, moving on to Aston Martin, and Lance Stroll, who qualified 19th, finished 18th, and Fernando Alonso, who qualified 13th, finished 16th. Shocker, really, for Aston Martin, I think, to be quite honest with you. Lance Stroll's qualifying really confused me. I wasn't sure why he'd qualified so badly, but I think actually he actually had a really bad setup on the car, and they couldn't get the car set up properly for him to try and really attack for a Q2. So his qualifying was shocking, but it makes sense that he was, you know, not set up correctly for that. He was nowhere in that race. Absolutely nowhere. I don't think I seen him on the broadcast at all, to be quite honest with you. He was noted for a safety car infringement, no further action, I believe. I haven't seen any penalties or anything coming through from that. He did obviously come into contact with Lawson, not his fault. I wondered if that maybe hampered anything or if he picked up a little bit of damage, because just a very poor weekend, to be honest, from Lance Stroll, but I kind of don't expect anything more, to be quite frank. Alonso, a better qualifying, but he didn't have anything to get out of Q2. They threw every available tyre at that man to get him into Q2. So when he got into Q2, he had no fresh softs to put in a decent fast lap to get him into Q3. So again, Alonso was just kind of nowhere, to be honest with you. I don't actually remember seeing him on the broadcast at all. A pretty nondescript weekend for Fernando Alonso. And I've actually got nothing to say. Moving on to Mercedes, who had actually a pretty decent weekend, I have to say, kind of on the whole. Kimi Antonelli, who qualified 4th, started 5th, finished 11th, and George Russell, who qualified 2nd, started 3rd, finished 2nd. Now, Antonelli and Russell were both given a one-place grid drop after the qualifying session for the race, because when the session had been red flagged due to Ocon crashing, the estimated restart time was given to the teams. It was not confirmed, and the teams sent Russell and Antonelli into the pit lane to wait at the end of the pits, which meant they went into the fast lane. They weren't actually allowed to do that. It was against the regulations, and they got a one-place grid drop each. Antonelli did some amazing work on the track. Just unfortunately, he had a poor race result. He sort of had his little move throughout the race, and it was the switchback around turn 4, and it was beautiful to watch. He'd go on the outside, switch it back into the inside, and it was like his little party trick. It's how he got a lot of his moves done. He was, however, pretty scrappy in quite a lot of his overtakes. He did get shown a black and white flag for track limits. I'm surprised, did he get a penalty? I'm surprised he actually didn't get a penalty, because after he was shown the black and white flag, he was still going off the track. He still had some track limits issues. So I'm surprised there wasn't a penalty coming there. If there was, let me know, because I actually can't see. I remember before we started recording, I remember going through the FIA documents list and can't see anything for that. And now the documents that are coming through are post-race ones. So interesting that he didn't actually pick up a penalty, because I thought he would. He did have a very bizarre strategy, which even out with the safety car would have put him on a 3-stop. So that's where he lost all his positions. He pitted the second time and went onto the soft tyre, but there was way too many laps left of the Grand Prix to survive on that soft tyre. So yes, he managed to pit under the safety car, and it bided him it meant he didn't lose as much. But that, I don't know why Mercedes chose to put him on a soft tyre when there was that much left of the Grand Prix, because the safety car kind of saved Antonelli, and it meant that he wasn't going to lose as many positions, because if there was no safety car, Antonelli would have had to pit again, because he would just have been too slow on the track and his tyres would have been absolutely gubbed. So why put him on the soft tyre for that second stint in the first place? Not that second stint, sorry, the third stint. He was never going to get anywhere with it. I find it so confusing. I thought it's a bizarre strategy call from Mercedes, because if they'd done a 2-stop, they potentially could have had both drivers scoring points. But for some reason, they committed to a 3-stop with Antonelli. It's very bizarre. I really don't understand why Mercedes chose that. I wonder if there was something in the tyres. I don't know. I really don't understand the reasoning for it. And I just don't understand the strategy call in that one. And I do think that had there not been a safety car, Antonelli would have finished further down the field than where he did in P11. George Russell, I think, had a superb weekend. Absolutely superb weekend. I'm not going to say it was a stellar drive from Russell. He did have his issues. He went to try and get the overtake done into turn 1 on that opening lap, had a lock-up, and it was a very close call with Oscar. I'm surprised he actually didn't have a collision. He obviously benefited quite nicely from the safety car. Russell had quite a bizarre issue when his transponder broke, and at first I thought he'd crashed because he just plummeted on the timing tower. His name just plummeted to the bottom, and it was just that they weren't picking up his transponder as he was going around the circuit. So rather than, and this is where it baffled me, Formula One baffled me, rather than just having the commentators explain the issue and what's going on, they just completely scrapped the timing tower altogether. And it was at a point in the race where there were so many battles going on around the circuit, and like up and down the grid, around the circuit, loads of battles, and those timings were so important because we were left in the dark. We had nothing. I just don't understand why, rather than just leave it and have the explanation of, by the way, guys, we're really sorry, Russell is actually still second. We'll keep you updated on that. Here is the rest of the grid still stands. We're just going to get rid of it. We're going to go old school, and at the end of every lap, show you the top, 5 drivers and what their lap times are and the gaps at the end of every single lap up until we sort of get it fixed. I just don't understand that, to be quite honest with you, and it really frustrated me because there was so many good battles happening. The electronics this weekend were off the rails. Baffled that in 2025, Formula One is having so many issues with the timing tower. It's happening all throughout different sessions. It's happened nearly every Grand Prix weekend so far. There's been an issue with the timing tower. When we got the timing tower back, the gaps on the tower were wild. I don't know where they were coming from. It's just baffling to me that Formula One, with all the technology and everything they have these issues. And I understand technology breaks and everything like that, but these are all supposed to be world-class systems, and you can't put a timing tower on the broadcast. Like, if you're hard up for the money to fix it, you've got that 10k that you find signs for having a poop in Japan for, so why don't you just use that? Anyway, that was not the end of the struggles for Mercedes. There was a bizarre radio message that came through that said that Russell might lose his whole dashboard, and that if he did, was just to continue driving as he was, and they would aim to get it fixed. It was just, it was a bit of a mess, to be quite honest, for Mercedes. And then when we had Lando, once Lando had got past Leclerc and was closing in on Russell, they actually had to come across and tell Lando, do not use your DRS unless you are absolutely certain that you are within the 1 second of Russell, because we don't know what the gap to Russell is, because his transponder's not working, so we don't know where about the gaps are between Piastri and Russell and between you and Russell, so only use it if you are dead certain. We're also waiting for the confirmation from an investigation that is going into George Russell for a DRS infringement. Now, during the race, he was having all kinds of issues. As I said, his transponder wasn't working, his dashboard was, going to go, and apparently at one point he went to radio, and when he pressed the radio button, the DRS wing opened at a time when he couldn't use the DRS. He did close it immediately, and he has said that, he didn't gain any from that. It wasn't open long enough for him to get an advantage, and that's sort of the argument that he's going in with. They are investigating it. He has been called to the stewards, and we're just waiting for that. I'm kind of hoping, for Russell's sake, it is just like a fine towards the team, but there is a real niggling thought in the back of my mind that he's going to get grid drops, that he's going to get time penalties, and it's going to drop him down the grid. Because I don't even think we've got the final classification out yet. I think all we've got is the provisional. So I've got the FIA website up here, and I've got the notifications and everything turned on for all the automated bots. So I'm just waiting for that coming through. All in all, a very decent result from George Russell. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. Russell is just like a little sleeper cell at the moment. He's just sticking that car. I mean, before it would have been where you don't expect it to be, because as I've said previously, I thought they were going to be slower than Ferrari. Do you know what I mean? I thought that they were probably going to be about the third fastest team. They are the second fastest team, and Russell is doing phenomenally. He's been on the podium now 3 out of the 4 races we've had. And I genuinely, at this point, George Russell, for me, is a championship contender. Especially with Lando and Oscar are just going to be picking race wins away from each other and points away from one another. That battle will heat up, and it'll be interesting to see how McLaren handle it. Russell is the sole driver for Mercedes that is in the championship fight. This could go his way, so definitely a driver to watch, because he's doing phenomenally this year, and he's become, I think, a much more well-rounded driver, and I'm enjoying watching him race. As I said, he's been a little bit of a sleeper cell. It's just come out of nowhere, but very much enjoying watching him. Now, before we get into the Red Bulls quickly, let's go back to George Russell, because the decision from the stewards has come through, and it is no penalty for George Russell for a DRS infringement. The document reads that the connection between the automated DRS activation system and the car failed due to issues with a timing loop provided by an external party. The FIA had authorised the manual activation of the DRS in accordance with Article 22.1H. At the time, the driver was also experiencing a brake-by-wire issue and other electronic issues. He was at the time advised to use an auxiliary button in the cockpit, which serves as a backup radio button, but it also serves as the manual DRS activation button. On the straight between turns 10 and 11, the driver tried to radio the team using his button, but instead accidentally activated the DRS. The DRS was activated for a distance of 37 metres on a straight of approximately 700 metres. Whilst he gained 0.02 seconds, he gave up 0.28 seconds at the next corner to compensate, and it was confirmed by the telemetry. Now, it is technically a breach of the regulations, but the stewards have decided that there was no sporting advantage gained, so there is no penalty for George Russell. All right, moving on to Red Bull, and we have Yuki Tsunoda, who qualified 10th, finished 9th, and Max Verstappen, who qualified 7th, finished 6th. How the hell Yuki didn't get a penalty for that contact with Sainz is beyond me, but here we are. He actually collided with Sainz twice, both at turn 1, but no penalty, so it is what it is. I mean, he was noted, but it was no further investigation. He is, I would say, incredibly lucky to be finishing P9 after a very scrappy race, those incidents with Sainz, and yeah, I mean, it is what it is with Yuki. I've not got much else to say. His teammate Max Verstappen, however, it was an interesting race for Max Verstappen, to be honest with you. Oh, I've got something else to say about Tsunoda, but it ties in with what I'm about to say for Max, so bear with. Both these drivers actually got sort of let down in the pits. Both of them faced an issue with the automatic timing light not going green when the car was ready to go back on track. So whenever the rear jack drops the car to the ground, the light goes green above them and they can go, and it's all sort of automated. That didn't happen, so when the cars were dropped and ready to go, the lights were still red, so both Verstappen and Tsunoda didn't actually head back out onto track, so they both had some not incredibly slow, but slow pit stops. I think they were within the 4 or 5 second range. When that happened for Max, it actually put him last. Was it that one that put him last, or was it the next one? Because he had another very slow pit stop when he came into the pits and they couldn't get the front right tyre off the car. I've never known Red Bull to have really bad pit stops, modern day Formula One. In the past however many years, I can't remember Red Bull having 3 really bad pit stops. This is usually a team who are lightning at their pit stops, so it was quite bizarre to see them really struggling in that area. Again, 2 of them through no fault of the teams. It's some automation and the electronics. I mean, the electronics on this race were just all over the gaff anyway, but it really hampered both the drivers. And at one point when Max came out of the pits, he was dead last. And he did manage to fight his way through the pack, and a lot of the other teams started pitting so he could gain track position that way. Verstappen also didn't pit under the safety car because he'd only just pitted, so he had actually managed to get up to 8 when the safety car restart was happening. And yeah, he managed to gain one last wee position in the final lap to Pierre Gasly. It wasn't the best weekend for Red Bull. It wasn't the best weekend for any of the Red Bull cars, to be honest with you. And, you know, Max said in the post-race debrief in the media pen that, you know, P6 was really the best that they could get and that the car is really struggling. They had no grip out there on the hard tyres. The whole thing was just a struggle. He was complaining of overheating. Everything in his car said was overheating, including himself. So I imagine it was probably quite a grueling race for him, and just not a great, not the performance of a Red Bull that we have come to expect in recent years, but seems to be more prominent through the latter half of last year and into this year. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with them going forward. All right, moving on to Ferrari, another team who don't really know what to make of Ferrari's weekend. We have Charles Leclerc, who qualified 3rd, started 2nd, finished 4th, and Lewis Hamilton, who qualified 9th, finished 5th. Both of the drivers started on medium tyres and actually seemed to struggle in the opening stages of the race. I think it just took a little bit longer to get the tyres up to temperature. They didn't really have the grip that everyone else around them who was on the softs did. But as all the soft runners, their tyres started to degrade a bit more, the medium runners sort of came into their own because their tyres sort of came into that window a little bit later. And at one point, Leclerc on his mediums was matching Russell, who was on his softs. Leclerc wanted to do a one-stop race, and it's one time I'm fucking glad we listened to Ferrari, because they actually said, no, you're doing a 2-stop. We're going with Bravo, Plan Bravo, in the alphabet of plans that Ferrari have. And they stuck him on a pair of another pair of medium boots. I think what they had seen was just how much Max was struggling on the hard tyres during his second stint. And it was clear that the hard tyre was not a good tyre for this race. So they stuck him on mediums. I think the reason they put them both on hards on the safety car pit stop was because that was the only new tyre that they had. It was either that or use softs. And I think the team thought it would be better sticking them on fresh hards and seeing what happens. It's a respectable result for both the drivers, to be honest with you. I think Hamilton's race could have been handled a bit better. Leclerc ran long in his first stint, and he managed to gain track position, and when he pitted, he retained a track position obviously higher up the grid, which meant that he could then battle through the next few cars with a much bigger tyre offset and regain sort of track position that way. Hamilton running long lost him track position because he couldn't then fight through a lot of the pack. So I do think that Ferrari could have switched the strategy for both the drivers. I think Leclerc was on the right strategy for him. I think they could have maybe switched Hamilton's up. Leclerc had a very itchy, sketchy moment. He was trying to get past Lando Norris into turn 1 and late braked and actually outbraked himself. You know, locked up his rear axle and couldn't really get the move done that way. Did manage to get past, but then Lando just came back at him and he really couldn't defend against Lando. Lando was just the faster car. There was some pretty decent battling between Lando and Charles that was quite nice through a couple of laps. But as I said, Charles just couldn't keep Lando behind him. He was too quick with the DRS. And then as soon as Lando was ahead of Charles, he just sailed off into the sunset and Charles didn't have the DRS to get back. Leclerc was another driver who had DRS issues. He just didn't have DRS, to be honest with you. I mean, it didn't really matter because he wasn't within the DRS range of anyone, but he didn't have DRS. It seems to be an issue with DRS up and down the field, to be honest with you, this weekend. Oh, breaking, here we go. Nico Hülkenberg has been disqualified from the Bahrain Grand Prix for excessive skid wear. He finished 13th. All the other drivers behind him will obviously move up a place. It's a slam dunk disqualification. Yeah, no, he wasn't in the points anyway, so it's not a huge loss. But it is just, is he in my fantasy team? Oh, I don't know. I think some of my fantasy teams are really struggling. We'll come on to that. We'll come on to fantasy shortly. But yeah, I think on the whole, a better weekend from Ferrari. Nice to see some decent points in the bag for Charles Leclerc. We will get there with Lewis Hamilton. I am sure of it. We have to, right? All right, finally, McLaren. And we have Lando Norris, who qualified 6th, finished 3rd, and Oscar Piastri, who qualified 1st, finished 1st. I have to say, with Lando, I don't think this was his finest weekend. I know he's gotten on the podium and he did have a couple of quite decent moves, but I, on the whole, think his racecraft during this Grand Prix has been pretty poor, to be quite honest. He had a fantastic start to the race and jumped up to P3. And I thought, my God, this is amazing. Here we go. This is Lando Norris on form. Turns out he also had a false start because he was over his grid box and got a 5-second time penalty for that. Slam dunk. You can see in the overhead shots that they did, he was very much over his grid box. So got a 5-second penalty. He had overtaken, I think it was Hamilton. He overtook him off the track. Thankfully, the team were like, give the position back because we don't want to get another penalty, which he would have gotten had he not given the track position up. But on the whole, I just wasn't that impressed by Norris, to be quite honest with you. I didn't think it was one of his finer races. He got a very good result, do not get me wrong. He is still the Drivers' Champion in the lead of the Drivers' Championship. But I just don't think his racecraft was that impressive this weekend. Not what I expect Lando Norris to be doing out on track. As I said, he did have some pretty good overtakes in there. That has to be said. Lando also got shown a black and white flag for track limits and was basically told, please behave because we cannot afford for you to get another 5-second penalty. And he obviously did. There was a bit of confusion with his DRS on when he could use it because George Russell's transponder wasn't working. Thankfully, kept his nose clean there. It was a good result after a disappointing qualifying, which I know he would be disappointed with. And I love Lando for it, and it's one of his best strengths, but it's also one of his biggest weaknesses, is just how honest he is to the media. I think it is refreshing to have a driver that is so honest with, you know, the media and really gets across how he is feeling. And I do think he gets unnecessary hate in that when people call him a crybaby and, oh, whiny Lando and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, in a sport where everyone kind of stays quiet and doesn't really say much, it is quite nice to have a driver that is quite refreshing, but who's quite honest, and it is quite refreshing. But I also wish that Lando would just give short answers like the rest of the pack. Like, I do just wish that he wasn't as open with the media because it is getting exploited by the other drivers. They're seeing, there's doubt creeping in on Lando. You can see it, like, after the qualifying performance yesterday, he said, I felt like I've never driven a Formula One car before, and he showed where his insecurities were and where his doubt was lying, and that is just something that the other drivers can capitalise on. The likes of his teammate, Oscar Piastri, can capitalise on it. Max Verstappen can. George Russell can. Charles Leclerc can if, the Ferrari is going to be getting closer. I think there is a benefit of not saying too much. But as I said, it is quite refreshing to have that. But I do think that there is times where it does work to his disadvantage, and I would just maybe sometimes like to see Lando just give the 1 word, 2 word answers, and he's got the support system around him to be able to go through all of these issues that he's feeling and the doubts and everything like that. I maybe don't think it's something he needs to put out into the world for the world to hear, because it is inviting hate towards him, but it's also giving his competitors and his opponents little niggles of information that they might not get had he not said anything. So that's my 2 cents on Lando Norris. But yeah, not an impressive weekend, but a decent result for Lando Norris and for McLaren, especially with Oscar Piastri, who I don't actually have much to say, apart from the fact that it was a bloody masterclass. From start to finish, that was superb from Oscar Piastri. He was the quickest in every session apart from FP1. And in the sessions that mattered, he absolutely dominated. He dominated in FP2, which is the most comparative session of the 3 practices. He dominated in the qualifying, and he absolutely dominated in that race. As soon as the lights went out, he opened up a gap and was never, I actually don't think Russell had DRS on Piastri once, because Piastri was just gone. He finished the race with a 15-second gap to George Russell. Like, he was stellar. It was phenomenal, an absolute masterclass. That is pole position, a win, and the fastest lap. Like, it's the, what do you call it? The Grand Slam. It was a Grand Slam weekend for Oscar Piastri, and a mighty, mighty win. What a result for his 50th Grand Prix as well. It was just a masterclass from start to finish. It was as close to perfect as you can get, I think, in F1. So he should be very, very, very proud of himself. He got very lucky with that safety car. It's not all down to that. He drove superbly the entire weekend, and a very deserving win for Oscar Piastri. McLaren's first win in Bahrain, and I imagine there is going to be some hefty celebrations in Bahrain tonight, considering that the team is owned by the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Bahrain. So it's almost like a secondary home race for McLaren, which they've just won. So well done to Oscar Piastri on that. Now, as it stands, Lando Norris is still the Drivers' Champion with 77 points. Oscar in P2 with 74, and Max has slipped to P3 with 69. Now, it was imperative that Lando actually got ahead of Charles Leclerc, because if he hadn't, Oscar Piastri would be the Drivers' Champion. Not the actual champion, he'd be leading the championship. As I said, big weekend for Haas. They're up to 5th in the championship, ahead of Williams, Aston Martin, Racing Bulls, Alpine and Sauber. This championship is hotting up, and Lando is in a bit of a better position. He's now 3 points ahead of second in the championship, but he is clinging on to it with his fingertips, and I have a feeling it's only going to get tighter. And with performances like this, Oscar Piastri could well be leading the Drivers' Championship pretty quickly. It is also, well, actually 5 races if you count the sprint, where whoever got pole won the race. Whoever started on pole has won the race every race this season. So obviously in Australia, Lando got pole, won the race. China sprint, Lewis Hamilton got pole, won the race. Oscar Piastri got pole for the main race, won. Max got pole in Japan, won. So it's very interesting. Fred Vasseur did say that this was going to be a qualifiers season, and with just how tricky it is to overtake on the majority of the tracks this year, we could very much be looking at a qualifiers, whoever gets pole wins the race, because if you look at the season, Australia, kind of an outlier because of the weather, but it can be quite a tricky track to overtake on. China, very tricky to overtake. Japan, the track's so narrow, we didn't see any overtaking really. In the top 10, there was only 1 position changed. Bahrain got some decent overtaking, fantastic race. Overtakes happening up and down, but whoever was in front in that clean air took off. Obviously, we have Saudi Arabia coming up. Good luck. Can't imagine we'll see any there. Miami doesn't really provide great racing, to be quite honest with you. I know there's some Miami stands out there, but I just don't think it provides good racing, to be honest with you. I don't think it's a great track. Imola, track's too small, can't get any overtaking done. Monaco, next joke. Spain, the track is so skinny, and I actually didn't realise how skinny it was till I was there for the Elms race, and it does not surprise me that you cannot get overtaken done there. And even since they fixed that final chicane, well, got rid of that final chicane, there's still not many overtakes done. Canada, we might see some, but again, quite a tricky track to overtake on. Austria, we'll see some, turn 3 dive bombs, I imagine, but again, can be quite tricky. Silverstone, phenomenal track, should be a very good race. Spa, again, really tricky to overtake on. Hungary, can't overtake. Zandvoort, can't overtake. Monza, very good track, we'll probably get some decent racing there. Azerbaijan, can't really overtake unless you're down the back straight, but again, the track doesn't really provide great overtaking. Singapore, can't overtake. Austin, fantastic track, should hopefully see some decent action there. Mexico, you can't overtake because you're too high above sea level. Brazil, one of the best tracks on the calendar. I'd happily take 24 Brazil races a year. That should be amazing. Vegas, should see some decent overtaking. It's built to overtake. Qatar, it's a MotoGP track. You're not going to see anything. Abu Dhabi, not really known for fantastic racing. But I think it's going to be very interesting, and it's in terms of whoever's qualifying first is potentially going to be the race winner, and I think that's what we'll see a lot of this season. We'll be back very shortly with our predictions for Saudi Arabia, the final of the first triple header of this season, before we have a week off. We're going to be missing Miami again because we are also in Monaco for the Formula E. In the week off we will be probably dropping our vlog from Elms, so keep an eye out for that. But that's everything from us. Enjoy the rest of your day. Love ya. Bye.